Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. will be announced soon. But who's going to win? Now, for anybody out there saying, hey, it's not going to be announced, I get it, because we get PTSD as boxing fans when it comes to the fights that we want made. Heck, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao was 5 years past when it should have happened. So I understand that fact. But trust me, when it comes to boxing, silence is deafening. And the fact that both parties have not really gone at each other on social media, and considering the fact that Terence Crawford is now in the same promotional company, holds that additional belt to move into undisputed. And when both fighters were asked if the fight would happen, they both said, yeah, this fight is going to happen. It's just too big not to happen.
Fight made, down the line and, real soon. Not down the line, real soon. And, give the fans what they've been looking for.
I mean, it's closer than it's ever been. So, if it don't happen now, it's never gonna happen. So, it's way closer than what it used to be. So, I think it's definitely gonna happen.
On top of that, we've gotten many inside reports that they are closing in on a deal, and recently, just as recent as yesterday, an incredibly reliable source in Don Rafael posted that the deal was close to being signed, so close that they are already constructing the undercard. And the fight would most likely take place in Vegas, which seems to be a neutral location. Now, the importance of this win cannot be understated. Terence Crawford is considered by ESPN the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, #2 in the world by Ring Magazine, and #4 in the world by BoxRec. So he's in the top 5 or #1, no matter how you cut it and slice it. Errol Spence tends to be a little bit lower in the pound for pound list, but he is on there as well, and he is 100% the #2 welterweight in the world. So him beating Terence Crawford would immediately catapult Errol Spence up to that top tier. Now, the truth of the matter is that both of them are technically already outside of their peak. Because considering when it comes to power and speed, a peak for an athlete would be around mid-20s up until the 30s, until there's irreversible decline. Both Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. are already in their 30s. Crawford being much older at 34 and Errol coming in at 32. So technically, they're just outside their peak, but in terms of the magnitude of their accomplishments, they're at their accomplishment peak, where they've beaten specific fighters to make this fight very, very intriguing. So if this fight takes place, who would win? Well, let's look at some data, because data, especially when it comes to boxing, is incredibly important for telling a story and even for predicting outcomes. Terence Crawford is 5'8" with a 74-inch reach, 38 wins with 0 losses, and 29 wins by KO. Errol Spence Jr. is 5'9" with a 72-inch reach, with 28 wins, 0 losses, and 22 wins coming by KO. So you can see why this is an interesting fight. Errol Spence has the height advantage, but Crawford has the reach advantage. Crawford has more wins with 29 knockouts. Errol Spence has less wins with 22 knockouts. And there are important key percentages to take note of. These are the percentages that are found in the CompuBox data. Crawford has 45.5 total punches thrown per round, but Errol Spence brings that aggressive pressure with 69 total punches thrown per round, which is pretty insane for a welterweight. And on top of that, Crawford only throws about 21.7 total power punches per round, and Errol Spence throws about 34.6 total punches per round. And when it comes to the landing department, the average power punch landed per round for Terence Crawford is 10.2, while for Errol Spence is 15.7. So Errol Spence overwhelms you with activity. Total connect percentage for Terence Crawford is 47%, which is the 3rd highest in boxing. So he is incredibly effective with his punches. Errol Spence, on the other hand, total connect percentage is 45.3%, much lower compared to Terence Crawford, but with a higher power punch connect percentage of 45.6%, while Crawford only has about 42.9%. But here's the big kicker. Crawford is much more judicious in the ring and much more defensively responsible, as his opponent's total connect percentage is only 21.2%, which is 17th in the world, and his opponent's power punch is only 26.3%, which places him 10th in the world. Errol Spence, however, opponent's total connect is 21.9%, and his opponent's power punch connect is a whopping 29.2%. So Errol Spence gets hit a lot, and when he gets hit, many of those punches are power punches. Now, the good thing is that Crawford doesn't throw much. But why doesn't Crawford throw as much as Errol Spence or land as much as Errol Spence? The thing is that Crawford's punches count almost every single time. He knows how to set them up. He takes his time setting them up, but when they land, it's a powerful impact. Crawford has moved up to the welterweight division back in 2018 with his first fight versus Jeff Horn. Jeff Horn, who in controversial fashion took the title away from Manny Pacquiao. Terence Crawford has moved up to the welterweight division and has knocked out 100% of everyone he has fought. That is his last 6 fights. In Errol Spence's last 6 fights, he's gotten 2 KOs out of 6 opponents. One common opponent being Shawn Porter, who was never stopped before until he met up with Terence Crawford. So Terence makes every punch count, while Errol Spence tries to overwhelm you with volume. Now, many people would say, well, Terence Crawford hasn't been in the welterweight division long enough. He hasn't collected all of the belts. But Errol Spence started collecting the belts right as Terence Crawford entered the division. And boxing is prize fighting. And with prize fighting comes a lot of politics and a lot of promotional team posturing. So many of the titles that were held in the welterweight division were held by the PBC fighters. So it was much easier for Errol Spence to capture all of those titles. Granted, Terence Crawford should have probably moved to PBC a long time ago, but I believe he was given a lot of false promises by Top Rank at the time and decided to still try his hat with Top Rank in hopes that he would finally get a fight with Manny Pacquiao, as that was being negotiated before the pandemic hit. He wanted that marquee fight under his belt. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and as soon as his contract was up, he knew what he had to do. Left Top Rank, and now he's at PBC. I don't see anything stopping this fight from happening, as the stars have aligned. Errol Spence has knocked out Dennis Ugas, who just beat Manny Pacquiao, to claim his 3rd and final title. If Errol Spence beats Terence Crawford, he will become the first ever welterweight undisputed champion in the 4-belt era. And if Terence Crawford beats Errol Spence, he would not only become the first welterweight to become undisputed in the 4-belt era, he will become the first male boxer, male fighter to become undisputed in 2 weight divisions for the first time in the history of the sport. This fight is as big as it can get. In my opinion, I have Terence Crawford beating Errol Spence Jr. He just has a lot of tools in his tool belt that he can use effectively against Errol Spence. All of the angles that are created by Errol Spence's southpaw stance will be mitigated by Terence Crawford's ability to fight in the southpaw stance effectively, which means he leaves his strongest hand close to his opponent at all time. And you can see things like this happen when a power hand is your jab hand. I think he's going to create a lot of trouble for Errol Spence, but I do believe that Errol Spence will come in with a lot of volume to try to take over the fight. But when it's all said and done, I believe that Terence Crawford will break down Errol Spence Jr. and eventually get the knockout. Both of them has fought top tier competition. I would give the slight edge in the welterweight division to Errol Spence Jr. as he fought the likes of a younger Kell Brook, Danny Garcia, and Sean Porter. However, Terence Crawford did beat the former undefeated Jose Benavidez Jr. of the Benavidez family and took his O, as well as beating Jeff Horn, knocking out an older Kell Brook, and actually stopping Sean Porter. I think when you look at all of the attributes, including Terence Crawford's reach, I believe that Terence Crawford will, in fact, come out with the victory when it's all said and done. Now, this fight is being set to happen in November, either November 12th or November 19th. We're going to have to wait and see, but I'm sure that it should be getting announced probably either, if not today, by this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this new video breakdown and video style. Until the next one, peace out.